Welcome to the PPUK Podcast. This evening, Exodus.
Hi guys, and welcome to the PPUK Podcast. Today we'll be doing one that is very near and dear to my heart. It's going to be Exodus. So with us on this is, as usual, is Lee.
Hi.
Andy.
Hey folks. Happy
Leah.
New Year. Happy New Year.
Hi, Happy New Year.
And Paddy.
Hello, Happy New Year and all that.
Now it just sounds really bad because I said Happy New Year, but you didn't, Lee. So now everyone then did. So now you sound like a horrible person, don't you?
I do sound like a horrible person, but hey, I've been counting down the days to this.
Oh, what a recovery.
What a recovery.
Nice. Okay, so with this one, I'm going to go around and just ask people's initial reactions when this came out, what their initial reactions were to this one coming out, because this was an album that just kind of came out of the blue for most people. And I'm going to go with Paddy first.
Oh no, start on a downer, but okay.
That's usually my job, Paddy, so you're welcome.
Okay. So I never fell out with Prince, but when I got into Prince, I absorbed the 80s heavily and lived it, and some of the 90s stuff I struggled with a bit more. Over the years, I've become a lot more fond of post-80s stuff. Now, Exodus came at a time, was it between Endorphin Machine and Come? Gold Experience and Come, I can't remember, but this didn't hit the spot for me at the time. I wasn't massively interested. I think it took me a bit longer to get into the sort of holistic sound of the NPG, an NPG album with tracks that sounded leaning more into just grooves and jams, perhaps, than, or at least as much as proper sort of song orchestration and what have you. So for me, at first, when it came out, I wasn't that into it, with the exception of Get Wild, which was kick-ass from day one. And I did have that on an old cassette, various tape with really mad stuff like Jane's Addiction, Ministry, 9 Inch Nails, Sisters of Mercy, and then this Prince track called Get Wild. But at the time, no, not massively into it. That has changed a little bit over the years, though it's not one of my most frequently listened to.
Okay, so Leah?
I don't have an initial reaction to this one because I wasn't born.
All right, rub it in.
Actually, what year is this?
95.
March 95.
Yeah, I was -3. No, -2. I was -2.
Oh, 3 minus 3, absolutely nothing.
You simply have no right to be that young, Leah.
How dare I? So I was -2.
When you were -2, what did you think you might think of Exodus when you first heard it? Yeah.
Hey, all I'm going to say is Return of the Bump Squad.
Nice, Lee's on form.
Yeah.
Miss Julie. Lee's a happy chappy.
This was an album that it took me a really long time to be introduced to because, as I've mentioned in previous podcasts, my dad was an 80s person. So growing up, I was kind of unaware of a lot of the 90s stuff, unless it was the hits that kind of came out throughout the period. So Exodus was an album that I really found on my own. And actually, in the grand scheme of things, it was an album that I found really late on in my Prince life, quotation fingers. So I probably, as a total of an album, wasn't even aware of it as an album until I was like 14, 15, which was really late for me because I already knew so much of the catalogue. And it was weird because I knew so many of the songs, but they were from downloaded bootlegs. So I knew like weird, obscure versions of the songs. And I was like, oh, wait, these are released. These are out there on like an album. So My first impressions of it were hearing it in this new context as a whole package, which I do have some comments on, which I'll save for later. But this album for me has some of my favourite Prince music of all time, but it's not all incredibly positive, but it does have a lot of my favourite Prince music of all time on.
I just love the fact that you said, I came to this a lot later. I was 14, 15.
Yeah.
I was like dressed as Prince by age 8, so
that is, however, 16 years after it came out. So
my brain hurts with this maths.
Okay, let's go with Andy. What was your initial reaction to this one?
I think I pretty much overlooked it at the time. Any regular listeners to this podcast will know that me and Paddy are broadly on the same page when it comes to 80s, and then falling off, like really checking out things in great detail in the 90s. And then I think pretty much what Paddy said, over time, we didn't even know each other till about a year or so ago, but obviously like many 80s Prince heads, I think over time we've come back and found ourselves reevaluating post 80s and appreciating things we didn't. I think at the time, I vaguely remember seeing Prince as Tora Tora on Top of the Pops and thinking, yeah, he can toss that stuff off in his sleep. I may not have even listened to it for a few years. When I actually did, and I've got what may be a false memory, this will hurt you, Chopin, it might be a false memory of actually finding it on vinyl at some point.
Oh.
And maybe I'm kidding myself and it was CD, but a few years after it was actually released, because I don't know what's happened to that if I do have that vinyl somewhere, but a few years after it was released, I picked it up on vinyl or CD maybe, and I gave it a listen and was actually, there was one song in particular, I'll wait on this, that actually blew me away and I think is up there in his top 5 things he did in the 90s. There's a few other things. Listening to it again for this podcast made me appreciate it, and it's a problematic album for reasons we'll talk about. I will say that I've always had a casual relationship with it. I've always liked the idea of the album more than I've liked the album itself. And these days, those two things have meshed a bit more, and I really appreciate how loose, playful, jammy, and garish it is compared to a lot of his looking for more of a serious, less fun time on other releases of the time. I think the front cover is a really good representation of the album. It's messy, it's sprawly, it's lurid, and it really suits the big splash of mess that he made on this album. And I'm a fan basically these days.
Yeah. Okay, with that one, let's go on to Lee. What was your initial reaction?
If you know me, you know how much I love this album. So obviously I saw him live in 95 and we got the tape sampler set, and I went to see him. We went up by coach, and obviously we all got the sample sets at the end, and we listened on the coach to the sample set, and obviously had Get Wild on there and everything like that, and everyone thought it was like the whole album and everything, and it was just all these mini samples. So you had all these samples and everyone was like yeah, and then it was like, oh, like the song had like finished. It was only like after a few seconds. And then when the album came out, I played this non-stop. It is a blaxploitation psychedelic opera is my best way of describing it. And it reminds me very much of the Symbol album with the segways. It's an album that you have to listen all the way through because it's a story, you know, the adventures of Sonny T in some ways. And it's a mixture of so many things: comedy, racism, religion, you know, there's elements of sci-fi on there. It's just, as Andy said, it's a whole splash of different things. But I absolutely love this album. It's one of my favourites, and I literally broke the tape playing it so much.
Alrighty, I'm going to be the host for a moment and say, let's go to Chopin.
Oh, okay. So
I'm predicting quite a lot of thumbs up here.
Well, I mean, I think Lee is kind of going to be the tiebreaker on this album because it's going to be like Andy and Paddy will have kind of approach it from a certain angle, and me and Lee will approach it from another. And Leah's
in the middle in her nappy
very
funking along.
interesting. What kind of, you know, that's a kind of really interesting thing to not be around when it came out, because I think that colors your perception.
Yeah, Team Canada.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for me, the first time I ever listened to the album start to finish was in the NPG store. Like, so that colors it as well, because it was a very immersive, magical experience. I just remember there was lots of stuff about, you know, like Come, and the Black Album had just been released, like kind of in the previous year or so. And it was really interesting I was just watching the chart show on ITV, and all of a sudden they had a video for a new Power Generation song, Get Wild. And I was just like, quick, find a blank VHS. And I think I taped over some other program to get it. And I was just like, this song is amazing. I'll get the single. It's amazing. So when I went to the MPG store and was sitting there listening to the whole album start to finish, I was blown away. I mean, it was a real...
Remind me, Chopin, what is the album that got you into Prince?
Diamonds and Pearls.
Right, I mean, but the one that tipped you over was Symbol, correct?
Yeah, because I got into Diamonds and Pearls when Thunder came out, which is the last single. So like I was still absorbing Diamonds and Pearls when Symbol came along. So it was just like, oh my God. And by the time that this was coming out, I think I was just listening to, I think Parade was the album I listened to before I listened to Exodus. So for me, it was just like, this guy is there and then he's there. I hadn't listened.
Yeah. Just putting Parade next to Exodus in the same sentence is amazing. Anyway, what other artist?
Yeah,
exactly. Like no matter if you love or don't love Exodus so much, what other artist? It's so crazy.
Yeah, can go from that to that, and I think also that what that colors a lot of my opinion of bands and stuff, and how much they contributed and how much they change things and how much they sound. I think this is like, there's a clear NPG sound, but there's also that this is one of those albums that, although blow me away at the time, I've come to reflect on as my musical knowledge has grown. And like, I didn't understand like the P-Funk references at the time. I didn't know, like kind of like the kind of Zappa-esque stuff, and that, this is my kind of introduction to that kind of psychedelic funk world. So all of my window into George Clinton comes via this album. So, I mean, now looking back, it's just like, oh, I understand where that came from, that it didn't just come out of nothing, but it also understand that how much of it was like, how much of it is him filtering these myriad of different influences, and it still blows me away.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, sure.
And say that one of the, I've been a big through Prince, I got into P-Funk very early. And when I was, I was 14 and listening to Prince, and then I got into P-Funk slightly tangentially, but I quickly realized the relationship. And then I loved all the George Clinton and Prince crossover stuff. Coming back to Exodus now and hearing it, actually, I'm going to come in from 9 different angles. I'm sorry. One of the reasons that I never really found my flow with this album is very obvious, and it's because Prince breaks the flow with 14 minutes of segues. And it's an amazing, crazy Prince decision in many ways, but it also, no other artist really has so much material that they can just squander and basically break an album the way he broke this album. He made something that's really amazing in lots of ways, and then just kind of made it not user-friendly, because 14 minutes of segues, they're interesting once, and some of them are funny in their own right. But just listening to it now, it made total sense to me. Of course, I never listened to this album, even when I got into it, because there was never a flow. And
it's not re-listenable in the same way because of the segues. Like you say, the intention, fine, but the re-listen quality is very hard, particularly when they're this long.
And of course, you can just skip on anything digital. And I know, Chopin loves it, but that's because Chopin likes it like a movie. But like what I'm saying is, like, what other artist would make stuff where there's really high quality in there, there's really great songwriting, there's really great jams, and then he breaks it as an interface for anyone but the most hardcore fan, and even then it isolates hardcore fans. He makes this stuff, and then he's got so many other toys that he doesn't mind. It's like when you have an Action Man and you're a kid and you give it a haircut or draw all over its face with marker pen. It's like, Prince, don't draw over your Action Man. Let other kids play with it.
I kind of like that explanation of it, but
sorry, I will let someone else talk, but I've got to spit this out.
Go on.
Listening to it again this time for the podcast, and I listened to it a few times, and I listened to it with the segways, and then if you just went from first song is Get Wild, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second song is New Power Soul, right?
Yeah. Then Count the Days.
Take out the segue just instantly between Get Wild and New Power Soul, and you've got an album that starts actually going bang, bang, bang. This is irresistible. You're in this album. Even if you didn't know who I was before, you can jam to this album. Just those two tracks next to each other with no segue say everything, and yet Prince scrawls all over it, all over his Action Man's face.
Okay, I'm going to make that playlist now and like download it to listen to at work tonight. Because I'm kind of interested in that. For me, Exodus has always been an incredibly immersive experience. Like there was a smell attached to it, like there was,
There literally was a perfume.
Yeah, literally, the Get Wild perfume is like
which I'm wearing on this podcast right now.
Yes, like I was like immersed in incense, perfumes, the room. Like so, for me, it was never about listening to an album in the conventional sense. It was about listening to a radio play with the story start to finish, a psychedelic kind of like, kind of like an acid trippy movie kind of.
It's kind of like Black Dynamite. Dave Chappelle before it was Dave Chappelle. It's that kind of humor with the segues as well. I love the segues. I think it is like you said, Chopin. It's an immersive experience.
Do you guys honestly listen to, or every time you listen?
Absolutely.
To it,
Oh yeah. Start to finish.
Okay.
Where do you find time?
I listen to it as a commute song. I mean, it's 45 minutes start. Like to me, it's a perfect start to finish. It's like
I absolutely get it that a small subsection of music lovers would love this in its entirety, but you are a small subsection. It's not a criticism. There are people who, such as you, two freaks, who
on this side,
who absolutely buy in to this folly, and I appreciate that. I really, like I say, when I was amazed all over again listening to it this time round and going, it reminded me. Of course, I never got into this. I never had the patience, but it tries your patience. But I did come out of it with a begrudging respect all over again. That Prince had such a deep catalogue that he could even afford to make this such a folly. And you guys are the ones who he was talking to, and those like you who buy the thing as an objet d'art in its own right, as a movie. And I respect that. I still think it's commercial death, but I respect it like hell.
But then so is The War, so is New, so is Expectation, so is Cena, and so is Madhouse. Do you know what I mean?
Is a little bit more, I don't know. There are a lot of segues in Prince albums that I love and I will listen to all the way through. But for me, I don't know if it's because I learned a lot of these songs from bootlegs where you don't listen start to finish. You cherry pick the songs that you've got that attraction to. So I never digested this album as a full complete package. I didn't have that, the taste and smell you get when you put on that album. I didn't quite have that experience. So when I did get it as a package, I went back to cherry picking the songs that I liked. And I've just never quite being able to digest the whole album. I think there's a lot about the album I still don't understand. I think it's one of those that you can unpick on so many different levels and still not understand half the references. But for me, I do skip the segues. They were really interesting, like the first 3 times I listened to the album, and I really enjoyed them. But for me, I do skip them now. And I hate saying it because I'm team 90s all the way. Everyone knows. But for me, I have just really struggled to digest the album as a whole. I do, as I say, cherry pick.
And
cherry pick, nice.
I am so split because I think it's an insane move. I do admire it from Prince being crazy perspective. I admire it from an artistic, eccentric perspective. But I think this is probably my pound for pound, my favorite 90s album in, if you take the top 3 or 4 songs from there, it's the best stuff he did for me in the 90s. It's buried. It's buried.
The way I've come to understand this album is think about the segues thing. Like, Symbol was meant to be this many segues and stuff, but he took it all out to fit in a song. I just think this, and Gold, although come out after this, is made before this with lots of like a Welcome to the Dawn, like the NPG operator thing. This is just something he had to get out of his system and come to Emancipation, where it's pretty much no segues unless they're kind of a little bit of reverb and kind of a cab driver thing. There's like 1 or 2 on 36 songs. I think this is literally just something he had to get out of his system, and it's an extension of that whole thing that he started with, like that whole WNPG. In his head there was always a radio station, and this kind of
also I think it's like a response to rap and all those shit. Like, yeah. Prince did do segues. Like, he was doing segues like back in the Apollonia albums and stuff, like a lot, kind of before hip hop. But then I feel like when hip hop happened and when it started to become the biggest music on the planet, and we know that Prince never quite got on that train correctly. But I do like that on this one. He gets it wrong, but in a really interesting way. And he just goes, oh, yeah, segues are in now. Well, mine are going to be 3 minutes long. I do kind of admire it. I just think it makes for a sucky album and an amazing bit of Prince weirdness at the same time.
I have to say this because I've been listening to something else recently quite a lot, but I think you can use segues, but you just don't want to overdo it.
Well, yeah.
I'm thinking, perhaps unsurprisingly, the people on this podcast, I'm thinking Rhythm Nation. If you listen to that with the segues,
nothing wrong with that. It's great.
It's so much. I can listen to the segues there because they're short.
Yeah,
they flow.
Yeah.
These songs, songs stop, and then there is a fairly long narrative that just jerks you out, and then you're back into a groove. Sort of. The former doesn't do that. It is a proper segue. It slips you into something. It's brief.
Right. And like 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul, which is a brilliant use of segue, and really, I think, kicked off that. I may be wrong, but I think that was the one that kicked that off in rap as being like almost de rigueur for the form.
Just interestingly enough, I've just made up the playlist now, and it's 9 tracks, 53 minutes long without any of the segues. So it's still a 1 disc, it's still a healthy size 1 disc.
But I tell you, just that movement from the first 2 tracks, from the first to the second, from Get Wild to New Power Soul, you just go, oh, this is music, and he doesn't let you have that flow with those segues, and it's crazy to me.
I tell you one thing that would convince me possibly that it was that it would be good without the segues is the Hallucination Rain, the original 10-minute version versus. I used to love Hallucination Rain and think it was amazing until I heard the 10-minute version, and now I kind of hear it as a kind of, ooh, why did you chop up a masterpiece kind of thing?
Well,
that's the only kind of that's the only way I would look at this as anything else. And what I really think is this should have been a good. He should have actually gone further, added more songs, and made it a double album with the same amount of segues.
Oh my God, you're insane! I mean, I love you, but you're insane. It's interesting though because you're the expert on this period. for sure, Shopes, and probably Lee. But you guys probably know all the variant track lists and what was there. And I've got a passing acquaintance with it, but I remember wasn't Superhero on one of the variants, and wasn't Love Thy Will Be Done, which if ever a song didn't suit the NPG, it's Love Thy Will Be Done, sung by Sonny. And you're gonna say, no, I love it. I know, because you're mad. But it's interesting, like how many, like this album seems to have been, not only is it a mess in a good way and a bad way, I think, but not only is it a mess, he had other messy iterations of it, and it's like if it's a gumbo, he just throws everything into the pot. He throws chili, beef, chicken, steak, then he throws in some licorice. You know what?
Which is weird, because when you realize like how this album started life, and this is Morris Hayes has said this on a podcast recently, like on interviews recently, is how this album came to life was that Sonny T and Michael Bland were just trying to throw each other off the groove in the kind of on the main stage, and Morris Hayes walks in and is just kind of transfixed, and they can't throw each other off the groove. They're locking no matter what they throw at each other. And like Prince walks in, or Symbol at the time, and kind of Morris Hayes goes to him and goes, this is amazing, we should make this an album. And then Prince just picks up the phone and goes, yeah, can you move all the stuff into Studio A? They moved the stuff into Studio A, and I think everything but Big Fun and Cherry Cherry, the basic track was recorded that day. Like the whole album.
Wow, that's insane. That's insane.
8 tracks, and there's like tracks that aren't on the album that were recorded that day. The only ones that they said that wasn't recorded that day, I think he said, was Cherry Cherry and Big Fun. So most of this album is a day's work.
That's unbelievable.
But with like 2 months of post-production and overdub. And
in some, that doesn't surprise me. Not in a derogatory or kind of anyway, but a disparaging way, should I say, but that doesn't surprise me in a sense, because of the amount that they're just leaning into jams. I mean, for me, that does. There's some class stuff on it, but it does come through. There's little patches that don't feel worked on it. So well, that'll do. Just for me.
Well, I mean, it's such a mess. I do like the messy aspect of it. I think it suits it, but it's also, like, if you think that it could have had Superhero, it could have had Love Thy Will Be Done, and it was just like, what am I going to do to flesh this out? I'm not saying these would have been right decisions either, but it's just like, for instance, Cherry Cherry does not belong on this album. I really like it. I don't mind that it's there, because the whole album is humorous to me in a good way, and I think Cherry Cherry is magnificent. Got nothing to do with the album for me.
It could have also had Funky Design, It Takes 3, and Sonny T's version of Acknowledge Me.
This is Prince's miscellaneous drawer, and that's what I like about it. And he does try and pull it together. He tries to pull it together with this narrative. That's an insane thing to do anyway. But this is like the alternative vault, this album.
Well, this is that kind of thing of like, in the same way that the Madhouse thing was, it was kind of like Prince's creative brain fart in a side, like in a, not to kind of belittle in that way. I mean, I love this, but like, it's just that kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, we should make an album out of it. I will, like,
but if Madhouse had gone 1, 2, 3, 4, Cherry Cherry, 5, 6, you'd just go, what? So 70% of this album, let's disregard the segues, but 70% of this album is that gumbo from, like, that's almost, in its different way, it's almost as focused as one sound like Madhouse is. But then you just chuck in other things almost at random, and even that's messy.
So the way I see it is, it's almost the Truman Show for Sonny T. It's like you're traveling through his head.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I like that.
It's almost like Sonny T is his own reality show, and it's almost the audio from his own reality show, and you're in his head, and obviously you're going to get all these different genres, and obviously Cherry Cherry is very much a Motown quartet kind of feel to it, and it doesn't fit. I agree with you, it doesn't really fit on the album, but I think it's just more of that whole, he's on hallucinogenics and it's like you're traveling through his brain, and it's also you're getting the different genres of music, but you're also getting the different genres of TV and movies. Obviously, finishing up with sci-fi in the middle, and then you, like I said before, you've got the blaxploitation elements to it, and then the gangster elements to it within it as well. So
I love that you get that out of it. I think I really like this album because to me, I know that people like you and Chopin and many others really love it, and I feel really fondly towards it. But it's not my favorite movie, but I love that it is for you guys. I really do. I love this album, and it's also not my thing.
And obviously, as Paddy mentioned, Rhythm Nation is like one of my favourite albums. Everybody knows that. Yep. And obviously the segues on that, it was that whole Minneapolis feel, and it always comes across, and it's that connection of like, it reminds me of this album. And with Exodus, I see it as it being the sister to the Symbol album, but I also see it as part of a trilogy of Come, Exodus and Gold. It's that period of time for me when I was, hardcore Prince fan.
Yeah.
And it's also, it even says on the liner notes, Exodus, a journey too short to live through one CD. The whole thing, it's meant to be kind of episodic in that sense. And, there's meant to be the Tora experience as well with that Get Loose on as well. So we don't know what's in there. And
it is kind of a clearinghouse for songs that didn't go anywhere else. And at the same, but like Prince wants it both ways as ever. He wants it to be kind of a clearinghouse and a kind of recycle bin, but at the same time he's going, and I'm going to try and stitch it together with a narrative.
I don't think it was that much of a clearing bin, to be quite honest, because most of the songs are actually purposely built for recorded for this project.
Allow me to push a bit of order and push us in a bit of a direction with a response to that idea of a cleaning bin, right? For me, Get Wild should have been on a bigger album.
Yes, I agree.
Commercially related album, because that Get Wild is probably in my top 3 or 5 tracks from the 90s. It's absolutely stunningly awesome groove track. It's brilliant.
And it should be played more at parties.
It wasn't a bigger album, though. It wasn't a bigger album as a different version on the Pret-a-Porter soundtrack.
Yeah, I was going to say it's on the Pret-a-Porter.
But that's not a bigger album.
That doesn't count.
That doesn't count.
Sold more. More people heard about it. But and it was a very vastly different version of the song.
Well, this version of the song, as it is here, should have been on a more prominent, commercially pushed Prince album for me, because Get Wild is a really, really special song.
And I remember it being performed on Top of the Pops.
Yes,
in March, and Lenny Henry was hosting, and Lenny Henry just lost his mind. He's like, "This is the best day ever."
I remember.
Oh,
and it was like, and I think it was the same week as me going to see him live as well.
And the version from the White Room. White Room version is just, the bass work on that is just.
Who was the sort of borderline sarcastic presenter that was taking the piss out of him in a beehive?
It was the bass player from The Fall, wasn't he?
That was it.
Yeah, whatever his name was.
But even like when they were promoting the album, the whole Tora thing about, it was his way of, and the argument with Warner Brothers that was, it was ongoing, and he became a character in itself, wasn't it? He was
listening to the album as well and watching those live performances. The other thing that makes me giggle a little bit is the way that a lot of reviews are sort of, it isn't really a Prince album per se, and I read more often than not, and you can't hear Prince's voice that prominently in the mix on most of it. You bloody can. He's all over it. Again, you look at it's almost as if he just he jammed and didn't take responsibility for the output. It's a Prince album.
Oh, even if he didn't sing a note on this, it's such a Prince album. Like the time. Up until Pandemonium, are Prince albums. Apollonia and Vanity are Prince albums. The Family is a Prince album. It's so Prince.
On some of those, at least you can't hear his vocals. So to an amateur, they might be like, "That's not Prince," but on this, you can literally hear him.
I know.
Over it.
I mean, it's not him. It's Tora.
Well, it was a contractual thing. I mean, like, it was part of that whole contractual thing, is where he was literally pushing the boundaries about getting sued with some of this stuff, like, because he got okays for some territories, not okays for other territories. It was kind of like a legal mess with Belmark versus Warner Brothers.
I know you love this period, and I do see why. And it's like it's out of control. It's almost like he was his own computer virus at this point. And like he's putting out, like, he can't sit still on one version of like Get Wild There. He has to do 15, and they all have to go to different projects, and they keep recombining in new and mutating into new projects. And you know, it's like, it's so, and I like that sense of, again, messiness and corruption, and like you just feel like, I don't even know what I'm listening to anymore. Where does the project start and end? Why isn't it this? Why didn't it go on that? What was the alternative track listing of Gold? What's happening here?
Well, I think, you know, to kind of dig into specific tracks a little bit more would be a perfect song that completely embodies all of that is The Exodus Has Begun, right? That is essentially like George Clinton doing Crystal Ball. Do you know what I mean? It's this, that's how I said the guitar work on that end is just that guitar work when it's, you know, da, 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 at the end, that the kind of da, 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 it's just, I remember the first time I got to listen to it in just with headphones and stuff, like I was almost like kind of like I was welling up. It was a really emotional experience, that one, because there's a lot of, you know, it's inventing, it's getting anger out, but not in true Prince form. Like the negativity gets put on a character. It's, you know, Tora Tora is Bob George. It's another way of him getting out these negative emotions that he doesn't want to associate with Prince or Symbol. You know, the kind of I would die for you kind of godly, beautiful, loves everyone thing. But he needs to get you know, this is a pressure valve. This album is like a pressure valve, and Exodus Has Begun. And pressure valves are messy. And I think Exodus Has Begun, the song, perfectly expresses that there's a whole ton of stuff from the kind of the co-lead vocals of like the low pitch versus the high pitch sermonizing about anger, to this really released, you know, kind of angelic kind of guitar line on the top of all of this. And I could sermon about this song.
It's an extravaganza, that song, and it's
yeah. Absolutely. It's not my favorite song by any means, but I like it very much. And what I like about it is that it updates the P-Funk thing. It recalls P-Funk there, but like, again, when we talked about Welcome to America, and I was down on quite a lot of it, and I was down on the track Welcome to America, because Welcome to America sounds like a redo of Make My Funk the P-Funk. And Jill Scott Heron, yeah.
And Jill Scott Heron, and it's right on the nose. This, you're listening to it, you're hearing P-Funk, but you're not going, oh, that's that. You're going, oh, other songs keep flying through your mind. It sounds a bit like Flashlight sometimes in the la da da dee da da from Flashlight, and it sounds a bit like It's Getting Better by the Pound by Funkadelic, and it's got loads of little kind of nods and winks to that big kind of, almost like Sun Ra, big religious P-Funk.
But absolutely.
It's not derivative. It's not derivative.
It's a sermon.
Yeah.
It's a sermon.
But even based on the kind of like a sort of altered bass line of Bob George with the low vocal, because it's like boom. You know, in the verses, the bass like boom, 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 boom. You know, like it's a half of the Bob George bass line. So it's like kind of a callback to his own stuff, which, you know, at this point had just kind of been released as contract filler. And, you know, it's
man, I gotta listen for that. I never heard Bob George in it, but I don't listen. I haven't listened that close.
In the verses, it's Bob George, which had just been released as contract filler for the Warner Brothers thing.
Right.
So, and I don't know if that's intentional or just Prince goes there. That's where Prince goes when he's angry and wants to kind of.
But I do like this sort of channeling of a feel without being derivative, and that's what he does on that track for me.
Yeah, Lee, what did you think of that track? I mean,
yeah, no, it's like I said. I was just thinking about it now in my head of like there's elements of like the seven deadly sins within it. You know, greed and sex, and then it's almost like a sermon at the end. And I want to listen to it again just to get that whole theory out of, I really like this album. There's not much more, there's a lot of elements to it.
The thing about, again, I'm not as much of a lyrics guy as people know. The way that it builds and crescendos is amazing. The guitar at the end is amazing. Anything where you have a kick drum and bass together, groove,
blocking.
I'm thinking Electric Chair would be my other one off the top of my head. But those grooves are just so nasty, and the brass part starts steadying, suddenly sort of get more frenetic and pointed motifs and things like that. It's a great track as Excess Has Begun. It's again, it feels very much a jam track, but it doesn't matter. It works. It's really good.
It definitely reminds me of the similar album, like, My Name Is Prince, Get Wild, and then The Sacrifice of Victor.
Sacrifice of Victor, yeah.
Exodus Has Begun. It's that big end and beginning, and that's what I like. A lot of Prince albums, you have a really good starting track and you have an end track.
Yeah.
The book ending on Prince albums is incredible. It's that journey experience with all the albums of, like, again, it grabs you and then you're kind of crying at the end.
And I think he took a lot of that from P-Funk as well, like Get Up for the Downstroke and stuff as well, like, and Flashlight ends up like a lot of those Funkadelic Parliament albums end on a really big kind of, we're journeying off to the next vista, the next starship, or the next planet, and that's what he does with this song, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and for me, the journey of how we get there is just as interesting. I mean, just to go back to Get Wild, I think Paddy said it's criminal that wasn't as well known as it should have been. I agree, but I also would put a caveat on that. I think the funky jazz mix, the Moneymaker funky jazz mix from the single, that is criminal that's not as well known, because that is a spectacular bit of Prince. That the kind of funky, slow kind of jazz mix of it, that it's just perfect. But just going back to Cherry Cherry, sorry to kind of skip around, like kind of a straw poll here. Who thinks it should have been on the album and who thinks it shouldn't? Because I think it should. I'm
going to vote yes and no.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm actually the same with Andy. It's
Leah, is that a hand up?
It's a hand up. I think it is a welcomed, chilled respite in the same way Count the Days kind of has that same little breathing spot. I think it's perfectly placed. For me, it's like the equivalent of Take Me With You on Purple Rain. It's got that breath just in between the madness. There's a little bit of calm. So I think it is perfectly placed on the album.
Paddy?
I don't like it. I wouldn't, not sort of actively, but it doesn't do much for me. I kind of get the 50s sort of vibe to it and that laid back thing.
Yeah.
Paddy, if you don't mind me asking, do you guys perform Get Wild, the band?
We have rehearsed it, yeah, and it sounded great. It's just like, again, if it was up to me, we'd play for 5 hours and put everything in we wanted, but it's just not a viable thing to do, sadly, so I can't do, but it'll be there at some point. We have rehearsed it and we do have an arrangement, yeah.
Have you done any other tracks on the album? I think that's what Chopin was going to ask as well.
Oh, no, go on.
Have we done any more tracks from Exodus?
Yeah.
No. We've a long time ago we talked about Return of Bump Squad a little bit, so you never know. You never know with us.
Have you done Mashed Potato Girl live?
Leah would be great for that.
Back to Cherry Cherry anyway, rather than me plugging. But no. If I looked at it sort of slightly more pragmatically, then no, I don't think it really does fit on this album. I'd go with whoever says it should be somewhere else, because I think it would possibly suit part of a sequence on another album a bit more. But that's to my ear, and hell, I'm a hypocrite anyway, because I like the more eclectic Prince albums, so I'm not sure what that says about my opinion.
I mean, I will say it's my least favorite on this album, but I love every single second of this album, so that's not really a low call. I mean, it's still better than, like, it's like the least favorite on your favorite album. This will forever be in my top 5 Prince albums.
I love that. The reason I like it and also think it's folly is how I feel about the album anyway. it's a magnificent mess. It's a mess by a genius.
Yeah.
And so, like, when I'm in the right mood for this whole thing, I will still skip the segues, but I'm so happy it's there. It's just actually somebody who's too good.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be there. It should be there. Don't tell a genius what to do. I love that.
And speaking of like Leah said, that this being a breathable track, a breathing track, because I wouldn't have put like Misa. If I had to choose the lineup, I probably would have put Funky Design or something like that. Like, but the other one that's a real breathing track is Count the Days, and sometimes the absolute heaviness and funkiness of this album, this little bit of like the times I listened to Count the Days on its own, the guitar work on it is gorgeous. The harmonies are gorgeous. It's a gorgeous little track. We when I was in a band, we actually used to cover this and kind of segue it with People Get Ready just as a little cover slot in the set. And the reaction to it was really interesting because nobody's listened to it as a Prince song. Like everybody was like, I love that song about the motherfucker song. I
hate that lyric. I hate that lyric. I've said this about many a Prince song of the 90s and beyond. I just think that lyric just doesn't work for me. I know you're going to love it, Chopin, that's fine, but it's like suddenly hearing in Avalanche, and again, I know you like this lyric too, but Abraham Lincoln was a racist. It just jars. It takes you out of the song and takes you to a different agenda. And again, that motherfucker thing in Count the Days, when I would be inclined to go with that song, and then suddenly I'm jolted out of it by what seems to me just wrong strength.
There's a radio edit of it I can send you.
Yeah,
the swearing cleaned up.
I always see that as like a chill out Samuel L. Jackson track. It's that.
You guys are totally on another trip with this album. I love it.
Yeah, but like going back to the segues as well. You know, I can read off the segues, and I see them as like reading off very famous Dave Chappelle sketches. That's in my head. I've been in restaurants and I've joked and saying, you know, I'm so mad I bought this joint. It was,
it's like Richard Pryor stuff.
Yeah, and Richard Pryor is obviously sampled on this album as well.
Mashed potato in my hair.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think it's that, like I said, there's that element of blaxploitation and that, you know, the samples that he was using in that era as well. You know, it's you know, and Richard Pryor is sampled on the album, so it's that, like I said, it's that humor element to it.
Also, interestingly, I mean, if we one thing that does actually stand for maybe Andy's thing of it being a clearinghouse is it's actually the first time that both Dream Factory and Days of Wild appear on an official record, because you got a clip of Dream Factory in the DJ Gets Bumped segment, and in Mashed Potato Girl, the car driving by, it's Days of Wild that's playing in the car driving by.
Amazing. Amazing. Just imagine what it must have been like to be Prince and just have we all have thoughts that race around our heads. It's just that Prince sometimes, quite often, recorded those thoughts and just chucked around, and this is just him brain farting all over the place. And like I say, like a computer virus. Can I talk about my favorite track by this for me is the one. No one's really mentioned it yet.
Go on.
Return of the Bump Squad.
That's great.
I've mentioned it.
It's been mentioned, but we haven't looked into it yet. This is the one for me.
Awesome.
This it is awesome. I'm glad you like it, Paddy. I know, but this is like 70% of what I love about this album is this song. This is monstrous. This is other songs come up. It drags other songs up with it, but this is the centerpiece for me. This is my Prince, and this is a melody that he's used again and again and again. And every time he uses this melody, and I've made a list of songs that essentially use the same melody, because it's long been a little thing I've noticed. Every time there's a song that uses this melody, I love the song. I love the melody. It was obviously a favorite of his because he used it so many times. And I call it the I Know melody because that, to me, is where it sits. That's the center of where it sits. It's that swung melody. Dun 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun. Now do it with Return of the Bomb Squad. Okay, it's basically the same phrasing.
Off. Yeah.
It's the same phrasing and it's the same kind of up and down nursery rhyme.
Mother.
So listen to this and see if I'm gonna. You can think. Right. Now sometimes it's not swung. It's swung on I Know, and it's swung on Return of the Bump Squad, and it's swung on Push.
Yeah.
Every time you can see. Every song is different. This is not derogatory. What I'm saying for once. This is Prince obviously loved this template and made loads of different songs out of it that each have their own feel. I love them all. So here's my incomplete list. There's probably more. It's Gonna Be a Beautiful Night. That's the I Know melody. The Ball, obviously, that's I Know. It Bees Like That Sometimes. That's I Know. Cindy C. You can frown now, Paddy, but go and listen. Cindy C. is I Know. I Know is I Know. Push is I Know. Return of the Bump Squad is I Know. Musicology is I Know.
Yeah.
And I was amazed and delighted when recently we got another one to add to this list, and it's Dog. It's I Know. And later on,
would be would be the first one, right?
It's the first one that I know of, but I still think that it's the I Know. But Dog is the first one. And later on, a very, very stripped down version. You can even hear it in X's face. 3 years
So everyone's
ago,
going to be doing their homework now after this podcast episode.
Yep. And you might disagree with me, and Paddy's already disagreeing. But if you go away and think about it, you
disagree with. Bye.
Yeah, maybe you do. But it's not the same melody note for note every time. I'm not saying that for a second, but you can plug them all in. X's face. 3 years ago, or maybe yesterday, I know there is a heaven. It's the same shape. And there you go.
That might be stretching it, but I definitely agree with Return of the Bump Squad. I know. Dog, I think I was listening more to the rhythm, therefore thinking of it of New Position. But you're right. He has these kernels. It's just like there's 9 to 5 people that that turned in, that was another. These are these tracks that are idea feeder tracks, and as we know from like the Get Off EP or the Cream EP or the NPG EP, that he's a master at taking a little element of a song and creating a new song out of just one little sample.
Yeah, but I think there's things. Again, I'm not trying to convince everybody that you might have a slightly different list for me or not include all of those. But go listen, go think about it. He liked this melody and he liked this phrasing and this timing very much. And every time it comes up, there's not a song that uses that template that I don't like. And Return of the Bump Squad and it's what he does with it behind it. It's a massive production. The guitar in the chorus is off the hook. That weird treated guitar squeal.
I've always loved that. There's a bass bit, like a bass punctuation, like boom, 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 boom. That's just like belted bass, wah bass.
This is like I Know crossed with la 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 he. It's that good.
Sorry, I could monologue about every song about this album if anybody wants to jump in.
I will jump back slightly, talking about songs that kind of merge with other songs, and I'm flashing back to Count the Days now. If it wasn't for the expletives, I think Count the Days would fit perfectly on Musicology.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Reflection.
Yeah.
All right. That is creepy. I'm tempted to do a screen share because my first note when I was doing Count the Days was, and I swear to God, would have sat nicely on Musicology. Absolutely God's honest truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that comes from you guys. I think me and Lee would probably never have seen that because we see this album as such a complete piece.
Yeah.
And you guys listen, especially you, Leah, listen to this track by track, kind of just going, this fits there, and then listening to it as a complete album. Gets
in
to
my
have
notes.
Yeah.
Sorry, in my notes, I've put down Dolphin. That the ending, it's very much like Dolphin. Count the Days and Dolphin are very, very similar. From a musical point, I don't know if that's how true that is, Paddy or Andy. That the very ending.
My
got
band
that.
have destroyed Dolphin for me because they hate making them play it once. So.
I'm not a Dolphin fan, but I do like that cyclic little ending, and it's that kind of little sort of energy running out, but quite kind of pensive and thoughtful. I agree, Lee. I do agree.
Thank you, Andy. You articulated it better than I did.
Yeah. It's like that beautiful little guitar flourishes at the end of Count the Days.
That was in my notes.
I can see that musicology would have benefited from it, and I do think, again, really, the song never. Again, it's an Action Man with scribble all over it. Those expletives make it very non-user friendly for anyone who's not interested in the minutiae of Prince. It's just like, it doesn't fit with that. Like, you wouldn't put motherfucker in the middle of Raspberry Beret. It's not the right place for it.
But was he trying to be that person with this album? It was a point that I was kind of thinking about earlier, about how we're talking about certain types of fans will only get this. And I don't think he was trying to get the masses to get this. I think he was quite proud and happy that only a little select few would get it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, maybe so. It's like, personally, it's a track that for me isn't as enjoyable as it could be because it's so classy, and then he unclasses it and confounds it with kind of wanting to be, Prince was never a gangster, but he flirted with trying to have it all ways and do the gangster, the G-funk and gangster and hip hop at the same time. And it's just like, I know he's trying to do it his way and say, I'm using this imagery, but using it within the context of a different kind of peace and love Prince thing. But it's like, you're also trying to get the kind of thrill of using gangster talk, and it doesn't work for me.
And it's also interesting with that in the music video, it's Sonny. But it's Sonny T is you don't see Tora Tora, even though you can hear Prince on the lyrics.
It's an interesting thought, even though he was kind of control freak and he had, a tour de force of music creation. I wonder if for this album he did sort of think, well, I'm sort of pushing Sonny a bit here and sort of his, I don't know, his daydream or whatever. So I'll do that because I wouldn't normally do that. And I can do that because there's a little bit of this that is being projected as not necessarily me. I wonder if that played into it at all.
But it's also, sorry, yes, sir.
I would say it's a little less altruistic than that, and say it's more to do with a way of getting an album out without saying it's a Prince album.
And I'd say it's not really about Sonny. It's about Prince molding Sonny into a character, like he molded Morris Day into a character. But I don't think that. So it's a very successful moulding because Sonny doesn't sound like he should be singing Cherry Cherry or Count the Days. It doesn't fit a cohesive character, but I certainly think it's actually about control rather than about, I'm going to present a Sonny T showcase.
Yeah. I think it's more about like how we're going to get one over on Warner Brothers by getting another album out when you said I can't. I think putting some, because even like in the live sets, like it's when they performed Count the Days live on the White Room, it's not like he brought Sonny up to the front. He was still sat in his seat by the
exactly. That was what I was trying to say earlier, because like in the music video it is Sonny, but then in the live performance it was Prince. Well, Tora, sorry.
Yeah, and he made sure that he made sure that mask was just sheer enough that you could see Prince's face. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, I think it was more of a Morris, like that Morris Day character is Prince, basically, a side of Prince, and he projected that on Morris Day. Same way that Tora is a kind of side of Prince that he projected on Sonny T and band.
The more we talk about it, the more I realise why I like it and why I think it's silly at the same time. The whole thing is that it basically, the time is a focused concept. The family was a focused concept. Sheila E. was a focused product. I mean, it's great music, but, just putting it in basic terms. There are so many agendas not wired up on this album. So many agendas. And that does make it brilliant, psychedelic, a real trip if you buy the whole thing. But it also is frustrating if you don't buy the whole thing.
But isn't that the kind of, basically, if you take the movie equivalent of like cult movies and stuff, like cult movies are like one of those things like your friend says, I'm going to show you the greatest movie of all time, and they show you this thing, and it's one of those things where half the room is going, oh my God, I'm going to be quoting this for years. I'm literally going to be quoting this for years. And the other half of the room going like, that is the shittest film I have ever seen.
Yeah, but there's cult movies. There's cult movies and there's cult movies. Some cult movies are very cohesive. Some aren't. Some are an incoherent, rambling mess. And this is not meant to be this isn't meant to be derogatory, because people love things because they are a rambling mess sometimes. And I think that this, to me, is a rambling mess, but with such high spots, it's insane.
But I think but it's a rambling that I love every step of the way, and it's like, but I agree with you on all on all the critiques that this isn't like this kind of great cohesive start to finish storyline, but it is a storyline, and it's rambles and it goes here, but everywhere it goes I like. Even, we start off, we go for 1 minute we're in the back seat of an alley, kind of getting beaten up and peeing up the alley at the back of the Glam Slam. The next minute, Maite's boiling us some soup and like drugging us, and then the next minute we're out in space, and at the end we're kind of
and I do admire it. I really admire it, but it's not my. But it's not. I love that you guys love it, and I love everybody who loves this album. Like, this is the album I feel fondest. From the entire 90s, I feel absolutely fondest of this album because I can see why people love it, warts and all. I really can. And how the strengths and the weaknesses just become the strengths for everybody who loves it.
So the other thing I love about it is that all of those like kind of characters, those painted characters that are on the album cover, they're not really kind of like painted characters. They're the kind of costume designs that the designer drew. To like, and then they kind of cut them up and included them as part of the artwork. But that was her going, okay, we need to draw something like this now. Let's get this fabric. It's like the design sketches for the outfits, and it's like, okay, well, you're going to take something like the design sketches for the outfits and make it the main theme of the artwork. And I think it was always criminal that this wasn't in a gatefold vinyl.
This whole album is like, I said, kind of, it's a Prince's mind as a hard drive, and he's accidentally pulled out the USB without unplugging, unplugging it first, and everything is so mixed up. All the files are corrupted. You click on one thing and you get the other file, and
this album's performed an illegal error. Do you wish to send a report?
Yeah. This album is absolutely corrupt and corrupted as a drive, and I dig it. I dig it.
So we just invented the blue screen of Exodus.
Hey!
It made me love it even more. I didn't know that was possible. I'm kind of high, talking about this album.
I'm gonna go back and listen to this album more and more now, because the high spots are great for me. And I have to admit, I'm going to, just like you said, Andy, I'm going to listen to it more. I've really enjoyed digging deeper and concentrating, and it's never an effort to listen to anything by Prince, but when there's other things you prefer to listen to, you get to a point where all right, well, I can go listen to that. This has grown on me yet again, having done a sort of a deep dive, and even more so because I'm sort of dying to say I predominantly use Spotify to listen to music, and of course it's not on there, and I'm like, oh God, I'd love to start mixing. Yeah, I'd start to love mixing this in with some of my own playlists to see what flows. And what
it's on Tidal. Is it on Tidal? Is it on Spotify?
It's not on Spotify.
On the subject of like talking to you guys and kind of melding our ideas or throwing things into different relief, I would like to issue a retraction.
To
Te Amo Corazon. Since we talked about it, after that podcast we did, I could not get it out of my head. And then I started listening to it, and everything I said about it, I absolutely retract. I goddamn love that song. Thank you guys for making me think about stuff again that maybe I hadn't. I overlooked that song. I did the dirty on it. I goddamn love that song. Motherfucker.
Leah, we got him, Leah. We got him.
Leah's raving.
It's only fair. You got me rethinking Adore, and now I appreciate Adore. So like, it's a fair trade, that one. I think.
I think that's a fine thing to do to each other, and that's why we're here. And like, you know, whatever. It's such a deep catalogue. It's I constantly, even though I know what I love and what I'm not so big on, I constantly re-explore it in my own time anyway, and come to different conclusions over time. But talking to you guys always.
Yeah.
And seeing it from your point of view, just the fact that you said that you see it like a movie through Sonny T's head, Lee.
It's exactly that.
I'm not going to. I don't think 3 months from now I'm going to be saying retraction. I think the segues are brilliant, but it does make it endears me to an album that I'm already endeared to, very much so, even more. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean the storyline is,
it's the misadventures of Sonny T. You could literally rename this album "The Misadventures of Sonny T."
Club, smash up the deck, DJ booth, and they play live.
Just to fit this in, when I was in Minneapolis in 2019, and I was in Perkins, the pancake place, at like 3 a.m. or something. Obviously, I got to meet Brother Jules, who passed away in December. So we'll dedicate this podcast to him. And obviously he did some of the stuff on this album, and the scratches on Exodus and stuff like that. But I got to talk to him briefly about Exodus, and that was like one of my highlights at 3 a.m. in Minneapolis, talking to Brother Jules about Exodus. So that was one of my happier memories, and rest in peace, Brother Jules.
Yeah, I mean, agreed, because I got to talk to him when he came over and did the alumni gig at Cafe de Paris and DJ'd that, and I kind of went behind and was talking about the remix experience, and I was just saying how much I like, because he was playing it, and I kind of was dancing to every change, because I knew that half-hour mix like the back of my hand, and he was kind of gave me a little kind of you knew that mix, like I just handed that out in my shop or something. It's just kind of like I said, that was just, I love that mix.
He was very, very cool to talk to him.
Really cool. Like, I mean, as you kind of see people in passing, but he seemed like genuinely touched when you gave him the compliment. It's just sad.
Yeah. Shall we wrap this up? Because I've got to go to Janelle's house.
Well, we can wrap it up with The Good Life.
Something,
That was. Had it come round to, does anybody want to suggest another song? I would have suggested Good Life.
I was sat here going, how do I interrupt them to say, how have we not mentioned this song yet?
Which could sit nicely on 3121 for me. That's another thing. This song is really, it's one of those songs that I wouldn't say it's a stupendous song, and I wouldn't say it's filler, certainly not. But it sort of sits somewhere in between, and it would kick ass live. I look at it as one of the. I'm not a fan of Emancipation, though I as a triple album and so on and so forth. But like Jam of the Year is a similar sort of vibe. It's a really, really. It's not a stellar song. It's a strong song in that context, and it's a really, really nice live groove. And I think Good Life kind of sits in that place for me.
I again, like Get Wild, this is one of those things that I love. I love the version on the album, but the again, there's just stellar remixes of this one. Big City remix and Bullets Go Bang. And also the Free the Music, which is like the nothing, which is like the To Whomever It May Concern of the Exodus album. That little kind of chopped up advert kind of a song. And it's just like, oh, I love the video. I love the video. I love the song. It's glossy, poppy. Had probably the most successful thing about this album was that the Good Life house mix was played in a lot of clubs, and and a lot of DJ guys. it's one of those things when you see the YouTube clips, the comments underneath it are never by Prince fans, unlike the Platinum Peoples and the Dancing Divas remixes. The comments underneath, like, do you remember this classic from back in the day? So it was kind of being appreciated more though by non-Prince fans, and there's not many Prince like stuff that was very popular in like house clubs or anything like that. But that was one that was actually worked successfully, and it's probably the most had the most impact outside of Prince world was the Dancing Divas mix of this. In fact, that was the version they played on the radio, I remember.
Yeah. It's, for me, it's one of my favourite songs on this album, first of all. I absolutely adore it. But it's one I always forget about. And it's not because it's bad. It's not because of any reason, but I don't know why. When I'm thinking of Prince kind of jams that are just kind of not too fast paced, not too hard to think about, but just kind of do your cleaning to. This is the perfect one. This sits perfectly in there, but I always forget about it. And it will come on, whether a random playlist or a random bootleg or something, it will come on. And I'm always reminded of how phenomenal it is as a track. And I absolutely adore it. Yeah. So we were talking earlier about listening to things more and us kind of influence each other in that sense. This is going to be one track that I'm going to make a point of incorporating into my playlists more.
Yep.
Yeah, and it is just such a little kind of like an air candy of just light, but still still groovy and still fits.
It's a positive vibe. It's upbeat. It's positive, dare I say.
And just kind of other tracks that the two tracks that we've kind of really haven't mentioned yet, Big Fun and Hallucination Rain. Hallucination Rain, oh my God. When I first listened to this album, I thought that was second for second perfection as a piece of music, and then it was one of those things where it's like Computer Blue. When you listen to the full length version and you go back to the album version and you're kind of like, oh, it's kind of butchered. Like, why would you even edit this thing? I would just put another, like, that full length version of Hallucination Rain is so good, I would put on another disc.
It is true to say that in Chopin's world, listeners, all Prince albums, but especially Prince albums from the 90s, should be about a month long.
Yeah, exactly. He's smiling. It's funny because it's true.
Join repetition. The songs are years long. I'm good with that.
Yeah. I was going to go a year long.
But with Hallucination Rain, in my notes, I've put like G-Funk era Nate Dogg. It's very much reminds me of Nate Dogg. You could argue that, it's that G-Funk era rap influenced, even though it's not a rap, if that makes sense. It's that chill out kind of vibe to it. But that was what I wrote in my notes.
I've got to say it suits the Sonny T character
exactly,
like way more than say Cherry. But and certainly again, Love Thy Will Be Done. Sonny just wasn't moldable into anything that Prince wanted him to do, especially when Prince wanted him to be basically, I want you to play 7 different parts now. Hallucination Rain is much more fits with Sonny's kind of chunky on the kind of. It's a good tip for him. I like it.
And that violin solo at the end.
It's really a really nice change of pace that actually adds to the texture of the album. And I like that a lot of people can make some sort of bouncy, groovy thing. A lot of people can't as well. But can they also do Hallucination Rain? No, they cannot.
And on that note, Hallucination Rain, in my notes, I had David Boulder was the one who played the electric violin, and he was from the Los Angeles Philharmonic. There you go.
That is
interesting facts. There you go.
Well, he was toying with a lot of classic stuff around this time, because this is when he was writing like Kama Sutra. I mean, even though it came out years later, like Kama Sutra was being done, I think, around this time, maybe a bit before. And also, we just had solo with the harp, like the classic harp. I think that just like, classic. I think he was doing classic music, but not in the regular Claire Fisher, just go away and do something for me. I think he was trying to kind of be a bit more direct with bringing that in as an influence.
Well, I mean, every time we do this, I just remember all over again. I'm just knocked out by the depth of the catalogue, even the messy bits, even the bits I don't like so much. It's all just, and I've said this before, but no wonder, he said it himself, why should I do that when I can do this? He said in interviews he didn't know what to do sometimes. Yeah. And by his own admission, and he didn't admit things that freely a lot of the time, but you really get, when Prince says he doesn't know what to do sometimes, there's a reason for it. When you can do anything, what do you do? And I'm glad he did Exodus. I think it's, to me, it's the freest, loosest, and most magnificent sort of folly of the 90s for me. I put this plus the song Days of Wild is where I really like him in the 90s more than a lot of other stuff.
Well, because I think with something like Gold, it ended up being so overworked, because the early versions of them were so good. Like if it had just come out, I love the album, but it does bear the scars of waiting 6 months in Prince's hands. And Exodus is kind of a much more direct, this is what happens when Prince doesn't have
Yeah, like I say, it's a corrupt hard drive, it's a recycle bin, it's a clearinghouse. I don't know. It's also attempting to be a coherent narrative in a crazy Prince way. And it's just a brilliant splash of nonsense from not just nonsense, but you know what I mean, from a really, really eccentric genius. And I like it because it's just got such high points. And there you go.
And it also, I think it's an album that's stuck in Prince's head a lot longer than many might think, because when he came around to do New Power Soul, he references this album twice. First in naming the whole next album after an instrumental from this album, and second of all, repeating that Get Freaky, Let Your Head Bob.
Yeah,
exactly.
The Big Fun, and so. And also, he probably played Exodus tracks as much as he played Gold tracks. He
did when I saw him live on the tour, yeah.
Especially in the after shows. I mean, because I tweeted about like a special deluxe, this. If I'm honest, this is the super deluxe that I want.
No. If you're really honest, you want them all.
Oh yeah, that's what I want. The super deluxe of this. I want every second of
He stands outside Paisley Park, rubbing his arm, going, "You got any more of them super deluxe?"
I want the first day mixes of this without all the overdubs, like those first 8. How did it develop? But that besides the point. But there was some incredible live versions of all of these songs played. Big Fun, there's some brilliant versions of Big Fun, like just bass jams, Count the Days, Get Wild. I would love to hear their arrangement of The Exodus Has Begun, because apparently they did rehearse it. And I can only imagine what a tour based around this would be like, but...
Well, you just enjoy that movie on your head as well, Chopin. We can't have it all. That was a really fun one. That's such a colourful thing to talk about on a cold, grey night in January. So thank you, folks.
That was probably the most we've disagreed, but the least we've argued.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
So the therapy's going well then.
I'll tell you what, I'm just glad you didn't ask me about Hallucination Rain.
Go on, Paddy. You have to say that.
No.
Don't like it.
It's not my. It isn't my thing. In terms of taste, the way it veers. No, I'll try a bit more, but no, not for me. I find it a bit dull.
I like the idea of it more than I like the timbre of it. It doesn't quite go anywhere that I'd really want it to go. I'm half in your camp there, Paddy. But again, it's a funny album. I think, Leah, you said it perfectly. We've all taken different bits and we've all agreed or disagreed, but like there's something at the heart of this album that there's enough there that something will stick to you, I think.
I think the bottom line about this podcast is this is an album that you've got to completely love him to even start discussing it, really, because it's not something that somebody who listens to Prince in amongst a load of other pop icons type thing is going to even be aware of.
No, and partly that's because it's littered with 14 minutes of... Right, let's get out of here, guys.
Okay, pick your favourite segue.
None of them.
Mashed potato girl.
That's my favourite.
That's my favourite. I will be in restaurants and I will be quoting it. And then the other one is Sonny T, and he's like
hallucination.
Something hit me. Something hit me and I fell, and that something was Janelle.
My favorite segue is "Ain't no acid in this house." Bam! Stop. Anyway, I'll leave that there.
Yeah, whatever's the shortest one, that's my favorite. Okay.
Okay, guys, I am truly, I've lifted, and I'm going to listen to that without the segues, just to listen to it as you.
Just that first to second track. All right, let's shut up, everyone. Let's get out of here.
Let's get out. Let's get out there. Yeah, and thank you guys for listening. Talking about what is one of my favorites. I'm really buzzed.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.